Hello, welcome to our live. We are inside the Radiantly Alive Woman, and we are into our third week of our SCAR series. This is a very exciting series, something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's been picking up a lot of speed. It's been very exciting to see all the scars that women are interested in, and most importantly, all the little dots that are starting to connect when women are recognizing, oh, I think that could be the reason why I feel X. And just having that little bit of information is so awesome and so helpful. So today we are going into a topic that someone has suggested we look into and get more information about, and it is scars on the wrist that has screws and plates. I wanted to highlight the importance specifically in this video around anywhere that you may have screws or plates in your body. I think I'll touch on that a little bit, and then anytime anyone asks me another question about another area of the body that may have screws or plates, I'll just re-explain and make it make sense for that location. But if you do have plates or screws and scars, I want you to listen to this particular video and make it relate to you, because there'll be a lot of interesting things in this video that pertain to anywhere else in your body. So as you come into this live, as I always say, let me know you're here. Hashtag live, say hello, so I know that women are finding the live and we can get started. If you're watching this on a replay, hashtag replay, so I know that the women who have asked for the scar are watching and that you're interested and still curious about scars. It's really helpful for me to know where all the women are at in this community. As usual, I'll just say again, if you have any questions at any point, toss them out right away. You can write them as I'm speaking in the chat if you're watching live, or just type them out if you're watching replay. I'm really active in the community in this group, and I will get to your question as soon as I can. And if it's happening live, I'll answer it in the live. That's one of the benefits of attending live, is you can ask me really direct questions, which is very helpful, especially if you have this particular scar, or you know someone who has this scar. Maybe you want to ask a question for them. Hey, Noemi, it's nice to be here with you. As always, it's nice to have you here. Okay, so let's get into what we're talking about. We're talking about scars in the physical sense, as well as the energetic and emotional sense. And then I will always give you a what to do with this particular scar, how to start. And maybe if I just roll back slightly, let's just talk about the importance of scars and how they can weigh down on our body, how they can really drain and deplete our physical body, but also our energy, and go up and down with our emotions, and how you can start to make sense of scars as it relates to you and your life history and you present day. Scars, wherever they are, all scars have a story. All scars have just physical components and energetic components. When you actually get into it, you can't really divide or break them up apart. But every scar will have a story, and we want to really touch into that. We want to get close to that, and we want to know what's there. We want to obviously understand the physical impedance, which is generally a lot easier for us to distinguish because we can literally see the scar on our body. So we go, oh yeah, wherever the scar is, that makes sense. All the the connective tissue, all the muscle, all the artery, nerve, and vein that's in the area, the lymphatic, I could see how that impedes and restricts. That kind of makes sense to me. There's a larger thing that I want you to keep in mind, in that we are whole human beings. And we're not separate. We're not broken up into chunks like we have potentially been kind of trained to think. Our conditioning and Western science and modern medicine kind of forces us into thinking of ourselves as pieces. What do I mean by that? When I have a wrist injury, I think about it solely as a wrist thing. If I snap my wrist and I break these two bones, my radius and my ulna, and I get casted, I go into plaster for X amount of time, I really only think of myself as having a broken wrist or a wrist problem. And I lose sight that there's this whole weave of interconnectedness, And all of these things need to be kind of reintegrated and reworked back in. There's a thing we've all done, when you broke a bone and then you got out of the cast and then you got out of the cast and you thought you were good to go. Someone said, okay, you got 8 weeks in the cast and then after that you're okay. But in a kind of a global perspective, you're not okay. You're okay as in like the bone is healed and now you can go back to playing catch or playing hockey, whatever you were doing, cooking, and that's great. But there's also a thought process that needs to happen that is more full and like more rich and more robust than that. And it, yes, includes like the physicality of, okay, my wrist is attached to my elbow, which is part of my shoulder. My shoulder actually makes up my collarbone, my scapula, my humerus, how it all attaches and kind of fixes onto my rib cage. Okay, my rib cage is like on top of that is my neck, and on the bottom of that's my lumbar spine. There's all that like physicality that you can think about and like and kind of look at in a holistic way. But there's the other components as well that we almost completely sidestep in modern Western medicine that need to be in our thinking pattern and in our approach as well. We need to be honest with ourselves that there's energetic and emotional stuff wrapped up in scars. And a lot of the time we think that we have this thing where we say time heals all, like time heals everything. And maybe to a certain extent that's accurate, especially so if you're doing other types of work. But oftentimes we need something more. We need something more than just time that heals. And we need to go into situations that caused us emotional strain, emotional turmoil, energetic stuff. We need to walk into that and kind of face it directly. We want to get there so we can resolve it fully, so that it doesn't compound and it doesn't keep rolling through as the years go on and on and on. We need to think like this. We have to. Otherwise, we're missing the boat. We are not just our body. We are not just our mind. We are not just our soul or our spirit. We are all of it together. And if we just tunnel our vision into one lane, we're not thinking holistically and we're not thinking about the ways that we can improve our total well-being. So that's why scar work is so impactful, because when you have an accident or a surgery or an injury or something where there's a scar, the access point, the kind of entry point for you to start working on the area is through scar work. You're working the physical stuckness, stagnation, all the impedance that happen in the area because of the scar, but you're also tapping into the stuckness and stagnation that's in the energy. That's the energy and the emotion that's caught up and wrapped up in that circumstance, in that situation. And this makes scar work incredibly impactful because you cannot bypass one or the other. Excuse me. It's incredibly hot here today. And it's really dry in the house because there's a lot of fans and air conditioning that are pumping for the first time. So we want to think about this. We want to think about ourselves as being whole. We do not want to think about ourselves in little pieces. If we do, we feel like we have an endless job and like all this work to do because we're so messed up, or whatever word you want to use. And that's not the way that we should be thinking about our health, about our process, and about ourselves as women. So let's get into how we can start to think about this scar. Wrist scar, plates, screws, what happens? The basics of this, hold on, I'm gonna have one more bit of water and then I'll stop. Excuse me. Okay, so the basics of this are, if you really hurt yourself, smack your wrist real bad, break it in some way, maybe you fall, maybe it's slippery outside, maybe there's a car accident, you need a lot of force in the incident to break 2 bones or a lot of bones. Sometimes there's shattering of a single bone in multiple different pieces. Or like there's 2 bones here. There's an ulna and there's a radius. And if you break them both, your arm is no longer straight. It will be like kind of flopping. I've seen that a lot of times in rugby. Not pretty. Looks very uncomfortable to say the least. So when we need pins, screws, plates, there's something significant and with a lot of force that's gone in our body. I want you to take that idea of a lot of force that has happened to our body and think about it in a moment when I start talking about the energy and the physical things to think about for all of this, but in this example for the wrist, when it comes to plates and screws. Now, because there was a significant injury, maybe you had to go to the hospital and then they were like, ooh, this is like a little bit too intense. We need to plate this up. Again, think about that for the energetic perspective. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of worry, uncertainty involved in that whole process. Then you have metal put into your body. And obviously, so they're trying to consider the size of the person, try to cover the right amount of space to make sure that the healing process is well and that it's not too heavy. So if you have ever had like a hip replacement, there's a hip replacement like for a female hip or for a male's hip or for someone who does like competitive sport or like horseback riding. There's like different thicknesses and intensities of the material that they use based on the person. So when this goes in, could you imagine having any piece of metal in your body if you don't have it right now, what that would feel like and what that would do to your physical body? Metal's pretty heavy. And getting your body screwed into, whether you're conscious during the process or not, your receptors on your body would have been present to the experience. It's a big deal. Plates and screws are a big deal any way you swing it. And a lot of the time we think that maybe it wasn't a big deal, or because it's okay now, it's not a big deal. And I want to maybe remind us all that it is a big deal. So we want to think about how it's restricting the muscles from functioning, all the connective tissue from functioning, including like ligaments and tendon and fascia. But also, I've done this little thing before where I'm thinking about the vessels in our body, specifically the lymphatic vessels, the arteries, and the veins. Okay, the nerves as well, if you want to put it into this. Here we go. So we want open holes to allow the best access, like entry and exit of fluid or of nervous signals, so electrical signals. And if we have some stuff in the way, something that was not in our body and now it is, there'll be a lot of like compression. There'll be a lack of openness potentially in this area. Because the wrist is like the smallest joint other than the muscles in part, other than the joints in the hand, this is like a very small, narrow area. If you compare like the width of your wrist to the width of your neck or of your thigh. So everything is like kind of converging, getting like smaller, but also like very intricate. The hand is really intricate. It can do a lot of cool fine-tuned stuff. What we can do with our hand is really quite amazing. So this is a hotbed of like tons of tendon, tons of muscle. You know, there's different layers of muscle to make our fingers bend at different sections of our knuckles, and to make it flex and to make it extend, to spread them apart, to close it down. It's incredibly rich in like nervous tissue, because nervous system has to get to the muscles to actually activate and move this around. Then we're thinking about circulation. When we're talking about physical considerations of wrist, plate, and screws, how's your circulation in your hand, into these fingers? Is it impeded? That's something to consider, because I would put my money on that it is. And maybe parts of your hand have good circulation and parts don't, other parts don't. Because maybe you have a good kind of flowing connection from this part of your hand. So like these first three fingers are kind of okay, but this part is really impeded and stuck because of the plate and screws. And so there's a lot of, there could be tons of different things. There could be altered sensation, reduced muscle function, increased sensitivity to cold, really bad circulation, meaning you're cold, damp, kind of get like sweaty palms. Anything like that could be happening because of the screws and the plates. So I want you to really keep that in mind. And then also what I was talking about at the very beginning, it's not just a wrist problem. It's going to be the whole thing as it connects up into your rib cage. And like I said, metal's heavy. Metal's like, you know, a lot heavier than bone. So when you have an arm that is potentially like feeling heavier, what is that doing to like the overall alignment of your body? How are you trying or needing to kind of compensate out of that? It could be super small, but just thinking about the impedance of fluid or of like stuff rushing into the air or coming out. Think about like any kind of tension that you may have on this side if the plates are here, into your neck, into your shoulder, knots around your shoulder blade. I want you to think like all this is connected. And because you've seen me do this connection thing a lot, think about the same side ear. Think about the same side jaw. Anything in the face, like sinuses, eye stuff, uh, nasal drip, headaches coming into one side of your body. I want you to think smart like that because all this is one kind of integrated piece. So that's the physical stuff that I want you to start thinking about. Let me just look at my notes here. And then the last kind of thing that I want to just touch on is every single person that I have worked with that has metal on their body will have a conscious aversion to touching or, just to touching or being near it, depending on where it is in the body. So touching it feels, people will use all different types of words like icky, zingy. It feels weird, feels funky. They will be very uncomfortable generally to touch it, especially if there's screws that are kind of like poking out and maybe kind of, giving weird kind of vectors of pull on the skin. That's not comfortable. And people may be really conscious of not banging their arm because, oof, does that hurt if you bang the metal? It kind of, zings, what's this like vibratory thing through your body. People may be very conscious of how they hold their arm. You may notice that people actually just always have tension in this side of their arm instead of just like letting the arm hang because they have a conscious as well as an unconscious thing of guarding. Breaking a bone, a lot of people will have an unconscious guarding still going on because it hurt when they broke it. And like I said, breaking two bones at once or needing plates or screws, something significant happened with enough force that that we need to like protect and guard and be safe. We need to protect ourselves around it. I broke my collarbone and you can't really, put yourself in a plaster or a cast for that. You get like this kind of really weak neck thing and then a little like sling and collar, a cuff and collar is what they call it. And you just hang out like this and it's hard to breathe. And if anyone bumps your elbow, you're like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. Like it's so sore and so sensitive. And that takes a while to like trust that that's okay and let that hang. So that is like let's just dance in between the physical and energetic for a second. There's that definitely going on. You will have a big aversion to it. Maybe the way it touches or just consciously either keeping it towards your body or sometimes people like hold it away from their body because the aversion is so large because it really feels tingly. Some people have like really zappy, zingy stuff going on depending on how the area healed, like how the scar healed, where the plates and screws and stuff are and how much they interact with the world with that part of their body. So the wrist is like really free floating. It can kind of go everywhere. So you want to be really aware of that. When you have screws, plates, stuff, there would have been some like natural slide and glide in the body because everything, if you've heard me talk enough, everything in the body should have this like nice slide and glide kind of interaction between everything, between its neighbor. So that's how things are really moving efficiently. There's, when I'm just extending my elbow and flexing my elbow, lots of stuff is like rubbing up against its neighbor. So there's like, simply the bicep muscle, but think about like the nerves and the veins and the arteries and all the stuff that as I move my arm, everything's going like, like just not maybe because that would be like needing WD-40. It should be like really smooth and supple. When you have plates, when you have metal in your body, that kind of puts a brake on that. Even more so if you have a really kind of gnarly scar around the metal. It really restricts that slide and glide even more. This promotes stuckness and stagnation even more. So these are the things I want you to consider with the wrist and plates and screws and metal in general as far as physical. Hey, Kathleen, nice to have you live. And let's go into the energetic. Let's get into this energetic. So I touched on this already. And let's just bring it full picture. When you have had a significant force in your body that breaks things, like things that don't normally break, that's scary. There's a huge jolt to the system, like a massive jolt, whether it was an accident or you fell or there's a car accident or some sort of thing. It was really significant. That produces a lot of fight or flight, like stress. That promotes a lot of fear. And then the whole kind of in between limbo land of when the incident happens, what are we going to do about it? Going into surgery and the recovery process of that. You could be going through a kind of a splattering of different emotions throughout that whole time, especially because it's your hand. Have you ever like had a splinter on like, I don't know, like your fourth or fifth finger, and then you were recognizing, or a paper cut, and you're recognizing, oh my gosh, like I use these fingers so much, everything hurts. I can't even like wash my hair. Like cooking is really hard. Just writing is really annoying. These are the things that we think about with a small little injury. When you damage something and you're worried about function of your hand, especially if it's your dominant hand, that's something very significant, something that you really want to think about and be considerate of now, like in this current state, whether you had this accident happen, a month ago or when you were really little, decades and decades ago, that could still be like playing into your energy and how you view this area and the whole kind of resolution and healing. So when we're talking about energy and emotional stuff and related to scars, we need to think about 3 different sections. We always need to think about the before, the during, and then the after, especially because there's a surgery involved. So I want you to think about that kind of processing, the range of emotion, the range of experience that could be all lodged up in here. And when you start doing scar work, all that will start to move and start to you'll have the opportunity to resolve that as it's kind of coming out as you're doing the scar work. So that's the kind of the main energetic component that I want you to just touch on. You really need to acknowledge that was a significant injury. It's a big deal. I keep saying that, but it really is. There's a lot of things that we do in like the Western like thinking where we go like, oh yeah, an ankle roll. I just rolled my ankle, no big deal. Ankle rolls are a really big deal. If you've damaged the outside ligaments of one of your feet, you only have 2. And like that's how you interact with the earthiness, the groundedness, the stability, the balance. There's a lot of stuff that go into ankle sprains are a huge deal. You can resolve most ankle sprains, but we're just kind of trained to think that these things are not so big of a deal. You get a surgery, the metal goes in, it's all good. Don't you think about it anymore. But that's very likely not the case. There's a lot more that needs to be thought, a lot more that needs to be processed, and there's a lot of good healing potential in areas that have had significant forces and blows. So let's see. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say about the hands as far as energetic and emotional. The hands are traditionally very much a giving and a receiving kind of location. And I want you to think about this as having open kind of passage or open kind of gateway. If the channels, the other energetic channels in the body are unimpeded, it will feel unimpeded to give and receive. And if there is restriction, if your hand is not working very well, if you feel altered sensation or any of the other stuff, or you just feel like the naturalness of giving and receiving is impeded, you may want to think about this. Like, how do you receive stuff? Do you find that when people, give you a compliment, that it is like you're hard pressed to receive that compliment? Do you feel like you brush it off or kind of downplay it. Check on that now, and then feel into that pre-surgery, pre-plates, pre-hand and wrist injury, and see if there's something to look at there. I want you to really think about giving and receiving, and also your ability to give. Can you selflessly give, or like compassionately give without any expectation for something else being given back to you in return? Can you just, no questions asked, give something out and not worry about, you know, what you may get out of it in the end? How does that feel in your life pre plates, screws, and then after? So that, I think, is a really cool piece. Always think of the hands as you're giving and receiving area of the body. The hands are also incredibly sensitive to touch. There's a lot of receptors on here. There's a lot of ways that you can interact and feel and kind of connect with the external world. And depending on the damage that was done here, or depending on the connection or lack of connection to this area, that could be impeded as well. So think about that with energy and emotional connection. Now, the third part, what are we going to do about it? Which is kind of the most important part. I want to introduce a concept to you that I teach often. It's called flushing. So I teach 6 body practices. Women in general are very intelligent, very mentally inclined, very organized, very heady in this modern world. And because of that, we've become a little or a lot disembodied. We don't have the tools or the practice to naturally tap into the power and potential that is the female body. We've kind of lost it. We've lost it in a variety of different ways, and a lot of it has started when we started menstruating, and we thought like, oh, periods are super annoying, and then we started using the pill, and then we stopped getting our periods, and all of these other things, the way that we shame and feel badly about our bodies, and all of these different circumstances that can come up in our life where we feel like our body is less than, giving birth, gaining weight, whatever it was or is. There's a lot of reasons, physical abuse, sexual abuse, that we have just kind of evacuated our body, and we spend a lot of time in our heads. This has done great things for us, but also we need to think about ourselves as whole human beings. We need our mind as much as our body. And actually, the female body is the best place to be harnessing energy and to be connecting with nature, because we are like the mirror image. We are the reflection of nature, and the potential that can come from kind of reigniting your inner dynamic, your inner connection is, it's serious stuff. And the more that you tap into that and feel that viscerally, the more you'll know what I'm talking about. When we feel depleted and stuck and we don't know where to turn, and we've been, through the ringer in life, and we've dealt with a lot of hard things, it can feel like, Kendra, I don't know what you're talking about. But the more you apply body practices and take time to just meaningfully connect with your body and give your mind a rest and feel who you are and how you want to show up in the world, great things can happen. So I teach 6 body practices. One of them is movement. Movement can be anything that's mindfully engaging, like yoga done correctly. Not studio yoga, not vinyasa flow, not modern yoga. But when you do a style of yoga, which there is tons of it in the world, don't get me wrong. When you do a style of yoga where you're connecting with your body and moving mindfully, this is really great. Tai Chi is also another really great suggestion for conscious movement. There's a ton of other ones as well. Martial arts, you can't really be, disconnected and asleep doing martial arts, because you're going to get knocked out. So martial arts is another really easy way to be present in your body. You're using your body and being present, so that mind-body connection is really solid. But another one that I teach is called flushing. So a lot of what I'm talking about is always wrapping us around stuckness and stagnation, getting a sense that we are not victims to our situation. We are not just our depression, our anxiety, our digestive issues, our infertility, whatever we're going through. We are not that, but we can feel like that, and that we get stuck like that, and that's the problem. When we start moving into the field of understanding that there's stuckness and stagnation physically and energetically and emotionally, then we can feel like things are workable. Then we're like, oh yeah, I think I'm getting this. I feel like I understand the physicality of stuckness and stagnation, and I see what Kendra's talking about when there could be energetic or emotional stuckness. And the way that you can start to move that is by applying something called flushing. You're going to hear me talk a lot about this range that we as human beings should be moving in and out of. It's easily explained as, get my elbow out again, because it's the only thing in the shot. There's a range of max elbow flexion, max elbow extension. This is moving between two different extremes. Extreme number 1, extreme number 2. Middle ground is like 90 degrees. This is happening all over our body. When you spinal extend, when you spinal flex, when you side bend one way, side bend the other way. There's this one end of the extreme and then the other. And so what we want to do is we want to experience both ranges to its fullest capacity, because we are giving a really good compression and a really good kind of stretch out, lengthen, and we want to pulse in and out of that, because everything in our body is naturally inclined for movement. As human beings, as women on the planet, we are in flux. We are in flux, and the more that we jump on that train, the better things are going to go. And so we want to kind of mimic this in flux idea with flushing, meaning we're going to go into a range as far in as we can go, and then come out of a range as far in as we can go, and go in and out of that. That's how our blood gets around our body. That's how our food gets all the way out and expelled through peristalsis. That's how cerebral spinal fluid moves in our body. That's how thoughts are going. They're coming in, they're coming out. I want you to really start to kind of embrace this idea fully, because that's just how things are moving and happening. So flushing is promoting that. We want to do and start with flushing in the wrist and elbow. The more joints in the body that you can bring into the flushing idea, the better. I don't want to get super complicated and overwhelmed this idea, but let's just get into it briefly so that we understand the basics. So let's just do one plane. If I can flex and flex and flex and flex, that's a lot of flexion. That's a lot of closing down of joints. If I extend, extend, that's the opposite. So if I wanted to do like a nice good flushing movement, I could incorporate my whole arm, bring us all the way full picture into the body, and get great benefit of pushing stuckness and stagnation in between the metal. A lot of the time there's like gooey, gunky, like thick kind of molasses-like stuff in between the metal and our natural tissues of the body, because you can't really pump stuff very well anymore, because like I said, it gets kind of stuck. So super simply, let's just go through one plane, which is the sagittal plane, which is the flexion and extension, moving in and out of that in the whole limb. So let's start out in the wrist and in the fingers, and then let's go into the whole arm. So let's do this because you can see it best. If I flex all my fingers, including my thumb, and then I flex down, that's closing a lot of stuff down, because yeah, that's like a very close, that's a fist, kind of. I wouldn't punch anyone like this, but this is a fist. Okay, and then you want to do the opposite. You want to extend and get the wrist to extend. So my whole palm is open, and then my wrist is in extension. Okay, moving in and out of that. And you can kind of hold at the end range for a second, 2, or 3, and then open up. Really feel like you're getting it all, like you're nailing a good quality movement there. So you're getting flexion and extension through not just 5 fingers, but also all these little tiny joints. Also all these little tiny joints in the hand. also in all this articulation between the radius, the ulna, and the carpal bones. It's quite significant, even though you're like, Kendra, this looks super boring and weird. It's really actually quite good. Okay, so you're flexing, holding for 2 or 3 seconds, and extending, holding for 2 or 3 seconds. How do we make this bigger? We're flexing, shoulder flexion. That's a lot of joints that are flexing. And then we can do the opposite. So keep the same hand movement, but I'm going to extend my shoulder, extend my elbow, and open the hand up. Hopefully you can see all that. Okay? Close it all down. Nice and slow, being mindful of any kind of tension that you may feel. Okay? Holding at the top. Ah, feels so good. Okay, so that's, whew, if you put your arm down, that is very significant as a really simple modality through one plane of motion. There's sagittal plane, there's frontal plane, and there's transverse plane. There's ways to get way more specific, way more in depth, but that's a really good starting point that I just gave you. You can do it with both arms, but I highly suggest you at least do it twice as often or twice as many reps with the side that has plates and screws and wrist problems. And let me know if you have any questions about that. I was going to go on and say a little something else, but I think that is a perfect place to start. You're thinking about moving glugginess. You're thinking about opening up space for vessels. You're thinking about getting muscle contraction again so it's not so dehydrated and fibrotic, bringing all the muscles back to life. A lot of time when there's plates and screws, there's like a lack of muscle strength and hard to keep it up because you're battling against something artificial in your body. So if there's any questions about that, I would love to hear them. I'm just going to take a little peek at my notes to make sure I got everything in. And just while I'm waiting for people, if they have questions, my final kind of piece on this is the really good starting point. It's really safe, but what absolutely must be done is scar work. 100% a lot of scar work needs to be done in the area because if there'll be scar tissue stuck into the plate and stuck into all the connective tissue and into the area, and that needs to be moved. And a lot of the time that can be kind of uncomfortable because there's a lot of aversion to the area. It just already feels weird to touch it. So I don't see any questions coming up. So like I said, if you have questions that come up whenever, you can just send a message into this thread and I will answer it right away. But thank you so much for being here live. I'm very much looking forward to our next one. And on Friday, we have the gallbladder removal, which is super cool and really important, especially so if you had that gallbladder scar, gallbladder removed when you were younger and you are now in your 40s, 50s, or 60s. I'm going to give you a really cool thing that I have learned just over time. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Noemi. And I will see you soon. All right. Have a good day.